I want to continue running with this. So what I was saying is like in another video, I was saying like, what would that look like if you actually saw someone just walked by. I was making this video and they're saying that's something 20 years effing. She said serial killers don't even do that. I don't know what she was talking about, but she said something about 20 years and serial killer, and that can actually fit into this video. So so when I was a kid, I watched the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre at a sleepover. It had actually been my idea because like when I would always be in like these movie rental stores when I was young, that's the only cooler thing I could think to do on a Friday was to go to a movie store. It was all about movie rentals in the 90s because we didn't have the internet, and you actually need entertainment. A lot of life is not sufferable. It's not viable. It's not. I had my first guitar teacher. He recruited me at a church setting because I was at the church setting. I would in the church settings, like sometimes like in what's called the black church, they challenge you a lot. As you don't get to just sit there in the pews like and be comfortable and entitled. They challenge you to worship. They're actually getting you way and far and away stronger by doing that. So they're challenging you to get up out of your seat, make some noise, engage the preacher, humble yourself, come up to an altar call, get active. But there's actually a fine line to it because you can take that too far too. But if you're not being tactful or you're not sincere, but you're in a black church, you're being challenged to participate in different ways where you're getting off of, instead of like being entitled and like preached to or sung to, you're wanted to almost to speak back, or at least confirm with one of the beautiful aspects of the black church is that it imbibes and inculcates and challenges an audience to engage in the service. And then by doing that first baby steps in the service, you get to the point where you can go in broad society and be as bold as a lion if it had been real, but you got that training in the service because you weren't encouraged to just sit on the pews entitled and holier than thou and righteous in your own taste in the pews. You're being prostrated to supplicate, to beseech, to call out, to praise, to revere, to prostrate, beseech a higher power with your actual body. So but also your stature. So I've made other videos saying that something of church, generally speaking, but also a lot of society, including school and whatnot, is a different standing contest. So in school, you're taking different tests so that you have different standing among your peers, but also in a lot of like social contexts and venues, especially as they become more formal and stuffy, but also even maybe sometimes like in a street aspect, you have a lot of different competition of stature and standing in a social context, whatever the pretext for the social context. One exception to that might be like a concert. If it's a really dope concert, we can get past that. I had a coworker as when I got trained for my CDL, and he was saying that he loves football outings and concerts. We had our first tour of work when I got my CDL. Before I actually drove a school bus where I was at, the city where I was at, they wanted me to immediately up and go to the next day over to a major Midwestern city the next day over because they start school earlier and they needed help for 2 weeks. And I was like, I barely had any experience, and they put me to a school that had the strongest reputation in that area, and I didn't know the area or what that school was the history, but I could appreciate that school, that there's some history there, and those were the coolest, sweetest kids that I actually, I don't mean to say sweet like in a derogatory way, but just genuine. The most genuine, kind, and real students were these students in what's called the trenches of that city, and that city has a reputation even around stuff like serial killers, like what I was talking about this video. And that was actually my experience when I got back to my area, is that the area where I'm at, an area with a similar reputation, the students that I met there were the nicest, kindest people. And I met a man working a job in my neighborhood that was from that area, because he was doing something at a register like this to do his hand, and it was like way too cool to be from the area of the Midwest where I'm from. I was like, you must be from somewhere different to operate the register like that. He's like, oh, I'm from such and such, born and raised. And I was like, damn, you didn't bat an eye. And he was like, People are always saying this and that, but it was actually a really nice place to grow up at, and I never had any problems there. That's a really cool thing he said, and it might have to do with the fact that one area is different to a person depending on your inclination and your activity there, but also your appearance. But all I meant to say is that he was right that actually my experience working in some of the areas where I'm at that have some of the strongest reputations is that if you're on solid business and you're doing what's right, upstanding, to be of service to a community, you don't necessarily have any more or less problems there than you would in a well-to-do area. You can get more nonsense in a well-to-do area. Where I said that sometimes like people from the suburbs, like kids from the suburbs, they're more problematic and dangerous to themselves and others, frankly speaking, because they got more of a chip on their shoulder and something to prove. Where people from a real background, they're not out to prove nothing, so it's not going to go there until it goes there and has to go there. But sometimes with privilege and entitlement and maybe outlying areas where they don't have some of the natural challenges of a city, they still have that need to prove themselves. So you can have more unnecessary problems in a well-to-do suburban area or remote area where people, they don't have some of the natural challenges that would give them the identity that they're looking for or the fortitude, so they bring them upon themselves. That was my experience growing in the inner city, but having friends from the suburbs, is that the friends in the suburbs, they were into more unnecessary mischief than my friends from the city. But he was right about that. But all I meant to say is that a couple of times I got around to, I was referring to my experiences in these areas, and I would say sweet like that, but you can get in trouble saying like, you said such and such is sweet, you're talking about this area is sweet, then it's a problem even from someone from that area, because you're not to call a place sweet. But I just meant to say sometimes your areas with the reputation, they can be more natural and genuine than you would take just off of the reputation. But I a little bit digress with that. But my friend, when we went out of state like that, my friend was all about living life and doing cool stuff. So we were way out of town, but he had sporting tickets to that team that state has a famous team, and he had sporting tickets there while we were just visiting. But then when we were back here, he was saying, I love sports, but I love concerts even more, because at a really dope concert, it's like everyone's cheering for the same team. At a sporting event, it's polarized, and it's this one against that one. When I would go to like sporting events as a high schooler, the parents were more problematic. So like the parents would be like talking to the refs, like, oh, they must have a good acting program at this school. Yeah, I can see their players are able to sell it to the referees really good. They must have a good acting program. But in a sporting event, it's competitive and it's polarized like that. In societies like that too. But at a concert venue, that's one time where everyone's cheering on the same team. But when I experienced a black church, they would challenge you like that to don't just sit there, make some noise. I want to hear you say hallelujah. And so those experiences like that are training you to become more, because sometimes you're actually making a fool of yourself sometimes, when you're not a fool, but you're essentially making yourself look less than tactful or dignified when you're worshiping publicly, like even in a church setting, a congregation. But that's generally, ostensibly, that's a safe space. But I've said that wherever you got that many sheep, the wolves can't be too far away. So you can have as much danger inside of a sanctuary as you would in broad society. Yet the spirit prevails there, and there's an influence there that'd be different than society. But if you're going to be trained to walk of faith in society, then you would need a little bit danger there to get your training. So you're in a mixed multitude in church, so there's danger there, therefore, in church, but you're supplicating and praying and worshiping there publicly. If you can make a fool of yourself for what you believe in righteously, then you can make a fool of yourself in public. So even when you raise your voice anywhere, anyhow, you're somewhat making a fool of yourself. But if you can do it righteously in a sanctuary, then you can do it in broad society, and you can be a real leader at that point. So I've said in other spaces that some of there's different things about like how society is failing. Some people would say stuff like black fatigue. That's pointing out the marginal members. But the broader aspect is that society is failing, and some of it is because we don't have leadership. And it came from the church in the community, and the church in the community, and the church in the community, which is not different in the past. But some of that leadership vacuum is affecting all of society, and part of it is because the churches began taking 501c3 nonprofit, and that corrupted the message.